valued guest resource persons this morning.
Yes, Mr. Chair, roll call of members of the Committee on Constitutional Amendments. Honorable Representatives, Chairperson Rufus Rodriguez, Senior Vice Chairperson Lawrence Defensor, Vice Chairperson Maria Victoria Copilar, Vice Chairperson Roy Loyola, Vice Chairperson Divina Yu, Vice Chairperson Loreto Acharon, Vice Chairperson Eliandro Madrona, Representatives Joy Salceda, Muhammad Dimapuro, Florida Rida Robes, Jefferson Conghun, Alfred de los Santos, Jonathan Flores, Rodante Marcoleta, Jose Teves, Raul Bongalon, Wawa Fortes, Roel Gonzaga, Elpidio Barsaga, Isabel Zamora, Dale Corvera, Johnny Pimentel, Emigdio Tanhuatco III, Reynante Arrogancia, Ronald Singson, Lord Alan J. Velasco, Margarita Nograles, Eduardo Brother Eddie Villanueva, Benvenido Abante Jr., and Lord Dan Swan. For them to be acknowledged specifically, Mr. Chair would like to make manifest that on site are representatives Elpidio Barsaga, Filter Palma, Ronald Singson, and our author, Representative Richard Gomez, and in Zoom.
We just have the presence of Congressman Bong Teves. Welcome, Bong. Yeah, on Zoom. Yeah, now.
Okay, may I continue, Mr. Chair? Representative Nograles, Vice Chairperson Madrona, Representative Zamora, Representative Fortes, Representative Swan, Representative Corvera, Representative Tanhuatco, Representative Robes, De Los Santos, Copilar, Loyola, Bongalon, Colyada. May I just make a count first, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Do we have a quorum?
Co-Chair, ComSec, I'm present.
Please register. Who is on Zoom?
Congressman Don Gonzales.
Our Deputy Speaker, thank you so much for the very successful public consultation at San Fernando, Pampanga, which you organized. Thank you, Vice.
I'm on my way. I'm on my way, Chairman.
We will be honored to have your presence this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, there are 18 members present, so it's an
How
overwhelming
much is the
quorum.
quorum required?
It's only nine,
Nine.
Mr. Chair, but there are 18 right
18.
now.
So especially with the coming in of my Vice Chairperson, former Deputy Speaker Divine Yu, please sit here with me, and we welcome you. So it's already 19. So quorum is declared. Please now read our valued resource persons who have honored their invitation for their presence in this morning session.
Joining us in today's public consultation, Your Honors, are the following esteemed resource persons, led by the Chief Justice, Renato S. Puno,
Good morning, Chief Justice. Thank you so much for coming.
President and CEO of the PhilExport, Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. Is he around or is he still on his way?
My good friend, he might be coming now on his way. Thank you. Next.
Mr. George T. Barcelon, President, Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, PCII.
Welcome, President Barcelona. Thank you.
Mr. Robert Maronilla, Head of Legal Services Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP. Is he around here? On his way.
On
Also.
his way. Okay, next.
Attorney Benedicta Dick Du Baladad, President, Management Association of the Philippines. Okay.
Okay.
Attorney Pe.
We
and then
welcome Attorney Pe, our President of the Deans of all the law schools of the Philippines. Thank you, Perry, for coming.
Good morning, sir. You are already acknowledged with the chair himself. And then Honorable Carlos D. Soreta, Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and International Economic Relations, or OUMAIR, of the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, Foreign Affairs, of course. Welcome.
Mr. Domingo Pinolasco, Assistant Secretary of the DFA as well. And Honorable Juan Victor Llamas, Undersecretary for External Legal and Legislative Affairs of the DILG. Not yet around.
Let me just therefore welcome our foreign affairs. We have a very good foreign policy. We are always having a not verbal protest on the laser, right? The China. So thank you so much. We have Undersecretary Carlos Oreta and of course Ambassador and Assistant Secretary Domingo Nolasco. Thank you very much. DILG, the Secretary Llamas? Wala pa? I will wait
Maybe
for
on
him.
his way.
Yes.
And then Attorney Marjorie Ramos Samaniego, Governor, Board of Investments.
Thank you for coming, Board of Investments. I think you would like our economic proposals.
Yes,
It's not to preempt you, but we will listen to your stand. Okay, next.
Then Honorable Crystal Lin Tan-Oy, Undersecretary for Legislative Affairs of NEDA.
Welcome, Attorney Uy, a new lawyer from the
Yes.
UP College of Law, the best law school in Diliman only. Because the best law school in Quiapo is San Sebastian, where I was dean. But anyway, everything, all our best law schools. In Makati, it is UP. In España, it is UST. In Mindiola, it's San Beda. So do not worry, lawyers. You're all coming from outstanding, the best law schools. Please proceed.
From the Union of Local Authorities in the Philippines to represent the Governor Dax Kua is Ms. Eileen Lecano, Executive Director. Good morning, Your
Thank
Honor.
you, Executive Director Lecano, for coming.
Then Attorney Jane C. Bacayo, Assistant Secretary for Administration and Department Legislative License Specialist of the Department of Agriculture. Is she around? Oh,
She
maybe
might
on
be
his
coming,
way.
on his way.
That's
On
all,
her way.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
With that, we would now just state what has transpired in the previous 3 months. Thank you all for coming to the 7th public consultation on the Committee on Constitutional Amendments. And it is the 3rd in the National Capital Region. Today, we will listen to our legal luminaries, our business sector, and government representatives with a special appearance of no less than the Honorable former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines, Chief Justice Renato Puno. The committee has conducted 7 public consultations in all, including the one this morning. We went to first Cagayan de Oro, then that is for Mindanao, Iloilo for the Visayas, and we have also finished public consultations 2 outside Metro Manila, and we have 1 in Pampanga, San Fernando, and San Jose del Monte in Bulacan for Luzon. The 2 in-house public consultations dated January 26 and February 6 reveal that 65% of the resource persons are, the first question is, are you in favor of amending the Constitution now? 65% are in favor of amending the Constitution now. And as to the mode of amendments or revision to the Constitution, from the 2 consultations here in Congress from the experts and different sectors, including the farmer sectors, the labor sector, and other sectors, we 52 are for the Constitutional Convention mode, and 28 are for, so therefore 52, so 48 for Constituent Assembly, and some are not in favor also of these 2 modes. They are not, they're against amending the Constitution, and of these 28% are for economic reforms. On the other hand, in the out-of-town public consultations, 93% of the reactors were in favor of amending the Constitution. 43% of them are for CONCON, and 71% are for economic amendments. We also asked the participants in these out-of-town public consultations to answer survey questionnaires on the 3 issues of necessity, mode, and proposed amendments. The results show that 77% are in favor of amending the Constitution, with 41% for CONCON and 38% proposed for economic amendments. The others did not say their preference, but they were there. Lastly, for those who responded to the committee's written request to give their views on the matter, 60% of those who responded are in favor of amendment, 46% are for CONCON, and 29% are for economic reforms. Therefore, based on the results, the committee is now ready to be able to listen to our final list of esteemed guests, and then ready this afternoon for the decision on how to go on the bills proposing for amendments through Constituent Assembly or amendments through Constitutional Convention. So that is what we're going to do today. And so therefore, I would like to ask our committee secretary to call our first esteemed, valued resource person.
Before that, Mr. Chair, would the committee like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the previous meetings?
Mr. Chairman, I most respectfully move to approve the minutes of the previous meeting as well as to dispense its reading.
Move. Is there any second to Chairman PD Barsaga's motion?
Second.
Seconded by Congressman Teves and Congressman Singson. So any objection? I hear none. The motion is approved. Our minutes are approved, and we dispense with the reading of the same, copies being distributed to our members last week. We welcome the senior minority leader of our Congress. We have here Congressman Paul Daza. Thank you so much for your coming in. Also, we have our Deputy Speaker, Christine Mehan Singson. Thank you. On Zoom, we have also like to acknowledge Congressman Lex Anthony, Chris Collada, Deputy Minority Leader. So okay, good. Many are still coming in. And we have also my good friend, Honorable Florencio Bem Noel, Deputy Minority Leader. Thank you. Please proceed.
The first resource person would be the former Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Renato Esponam.
Chief Justice, the floor is yours.
The outset, let me thank the honorable members of the committee, especially the chairman, for the invitation to be one of the resource persons in this morning's hearing. Your Honors, I wrote some notes last night on the three issues that I am supposed to address to prevent the unnecessary meandering of the mind of a senior citizen. Let me first address the first issue, whether or not it is necessary to amend the Constitution. I have always taken the position that the 1987 Constitution should not only be amended, but should be revised. This is not to say that the 1987 Constitution is a bad Constitution. In many respects, it is better than the 1935 and the 1973 constitutions. I say so because in general, the 1987 Constitution is more protective of the civil and political rights of our people. As a former Chief Justice, I appreciate also the fact that the 1987 Constitution gave more powers to the judiciary to check infringement of the fundamental law on the part of the other branches of government. Likewise, the judiciary that came out of the 1987 Constitution was less politicized, hence more independent than the courts under the previous constitutions. There are other excellent features of the 1987 Constitution, but this is not the time to fine-comb them due to the constraints of our time. Proceeding from these premises, the 1987 Constitution, I respectfully submit, needs to be revised to meet our current needs and necessities. The 1987 Constitution is good in the decades of the 80s and the 90s, or the last decades of the 20th century. We have crossed 2 decades of the 21st century. The world in the last decades of the 20th century is a totally different world in the opening decades of the 21st century. The geopolitical situation in the world has undergone radical transformation. The balance of political and economic power in this planet has changed. The digital revolution is redefining our way of life, including the text and textures of our fundamental rights to life, liberty, and property. Wars are being fought with weapons hitherto unknown to us, and yet can wipe out mankind in minutes of time. I need not scatter the granulars of these changes, but all these are known to your honors. I therefore commend to you that we revise the 1987 Constitution, for its piecemeal amendment will not adequately address the many problems our people have to grapple down to the ground today. The second issue that I wish to address is if in the affirmative, what is your preferred mode of amendment? Again, I will not belabor the 3 ways of amending or revising our Constitution. To the point, I respectfully submit that the best way to amend or revise the Constitution is through a constitutional convention. But I am not suggesting the traditional constitutional convention where all the members are elected by the people. Given the seeming deterioration of our political processes, there is the lurking danger that the elected delegates to a constitutional convention, and pardon me for saying it, will just be proxies or factotums of political dynasties and economic oligarchs. More people with the needed expertise in politics, in law, in economics may not join the election knowing its futility. I therefore suggest to your honors that they call for a hybrid constitutional convention. Hybrid in the sense that membership of the constitutional convention will come from election and from appointments. X number of seats may be filled up by election, and another X number may be filled up by appointment. There should be a process in both election and appointment in order to ensure that the election is non-partisan, in order to ensure that the election will not be costly. On the other hand, the appointees should be strictly vetted to ensure their expertise and to ensure their non-partisanship. The body that will undertake this important vetting can be composed of representatives from the executive and the legislature. In other words, the power to appoint these experts will not be monopolized by the executive. I submit that Congress has the power to determine the composition of the Constitutional Convention. This hybrid model has been used in other countries with no serious constitutional issues raised against it. This model will assure a constitutional convention that is both independent and competent. That I submit, Your Honors, should be the model that ought to be adopted. A hybrid convention with delegates who are independent and will not be influenced by interests other than the general welfare of the people, and will be composed of delegates who are knowledgeable, who will not lead us into sleepwalking into an uncertain and perilous future. Let me address the third issue. And the third issue is, what are your proposed amendments? Your Honors, former President Duterte ran and won the presidency on the basis of a platform that the people at that time perceived to be valid. One plank of that platform is revision of the 1987 Constitution in order to adopt a federal form of government. He formed a consultative committee composed of 22 prominent individuals. Among them is the Reverend Aquino, a law expert, former Senate President Aquilino Nene Pimentel Jr. was its vice chair, and I happen to be the chairman. We labored hard, day and night. And after 6 months, we produced a draft of the federal constitution. That draft, Your Honors, not only adopted a federal form of government suited to the history and culture of the Filipinos, but more importantly, tailored to their needs and to the necessities of the time. We propose, Your Honors, bold innovations in our 1987 Constitution, starting from the preamble to its amendments and revisions. Unfortunately, time and other factors conspired against its adoption. With the humility, I would like to resubmit for your consideration all the proposed amendments in the draft federal constitution. To advocates of human rights, we expanded the range of human rights in our Bill of Rights in this draft federal constitution. Our 1987 Constitution protected only civil and political rights. We propose to include in the umbrella of protection social and economic rights to guarantee every person's right to adequate food, universal and comprehensive health care, complete quality education, adequate and decent housing and livelihood, and employment opportunities. We also included in it the protection of environmental and ecological rights and guarantees to every person a healthful environment and a balanced ecology, clean air, clean water, clean soil, and clean surroundings. To advocates of reforming our electoral process in order to elect the best and the brightest among the Filipinos, we proposed in that draft a slew of reforms, such as reforms to strengthen political parties, such as prohibiting political antagonism, regulating election expenditures and contributions, and strengthening their democratic system of internal decision-making, as well as outlawing political dynasties through self-executing provisions. To those who advocate greater protection of our national security, we stress in that draft constitution the need to enhance our cyber security. Note, Your Honors, that our 1987 Constitution does not have any provision on cyber security. No word, no sentence, no comma, no period whatsoever about cybersecurity. This is not to impugn the competence of the commissioners who wrote the 1987 Constitution. The reason for the omission is simply because cybersecurity was an unknown quantity at the time the 87 Constitution was written. And we do not expect the commissioners to be endowed with the all-seeing eye. And so, Your Honors, we propose in that draft provisions to protect government and the people from unauthorized domestic or foreign intrusions, such as cyber attacks and cyber warfare on its public utilities, cyber installations, and private entities like banks and financial institutions. In our draft, Your Honors, we propose how these cyber attacks, which endanger our national security, should be dealt with by the President as Commander-in-Chief. And we also propose the proper checks to the exercise of this emergency power by the President acting as Commander-in-Chief. As I said, Your Honor, I cannot discuss all the changes proposed in our draft Bayanihan Federal Constitution for lack of time. But let me just leave for your consideration the imperative need to constitutionalize the status of the Bangsamoro. As we know, Your Honors, we now have the Bangsamoro Organic Act that allowed Bangsamoro to adopt a federal form of government and that granted it federal powers. The constitutionality of the Bangsamoro Organic Act has been questioned, and the case is pending resolution in our High Court. I do not know how the High Court will decide this case, but the danger is there that the law may be struck down as unconstitutional. And again, we may be confronted by rebellions and secessionist movements in the South. We cannot afford at this time rebellions and secessionist movements when we are still recovering from the devastations of the COVID-19 and recovering from the economic fallouts coming from the Russia-Ukraine war. Your Honors, let me go to the proposal to liberalize the economic 1987 Constitution. To be sure, these economic restrictions did not see the light of print for the first time in our 1987 Constitution. These economic restrictions are found in our 1935 and 1973 Constitution. Indeed, these economic restrictions, starting from the 1935 Constitution, were one of the high selling points because of their nationalistic spirit, which was easily embraced by the people. That is one reason why the Constitution was ratified by the people. The world at that time just underwent World War II. The architecture of the world order was geared towards the sovereignty of the nations. towards protecting, towards the philosophy of protectionism and towards and the concept of globalization at that time has yet to be born. After a century, however, the complexion of international relations has taken a different color. A new world order seems to be on the making, with different actors advocating a world with little or a world without borders with respect to trade of certain goods and trade of services. Necessarily, this development has demanded a no-nonsense examination of the restrictive economic provisions of our Constitution, lest they hamper our rush to progress and prosperity. Your Honors, this issue has hounded us for decades now, and we have not settled it for various reasons. It is an issue that kicks up a lot of passion and a lot of emotion, considering its nationalistic philosophy. It is an issue also where experts do not share a common stand, an issue that splits them down the middle. The discussions on this issue throw around a lot of facts, a lot of figures that sometimes cannot be reconciled with one another. And that makes the confusion more confusing, to steal a phrase from a writer. We will not add to this confusion, even as lawyers are alleged to have invented chaos and confusion. This is not an issue. This is an issue, Your Honors, where the dominant complexion is economics, economic facts, and economic data. I will leave it to the economists to provide the enlightenment on the data, information, and facts that ought to be considered by the committee before it forms its judgment on whether the economic restrictions need to be loosened up to attract more foreign investors. A few days ago, President Marcos Jr. has his own take on the matter. He expressed reluctance. We are informed that his foreign visit netted fabulous amounts of investments, and there was nary a mention of the need to lift the economic restrictions in our fundamental law. Again, Your Honors, this view merits a lot of weight, considering that the President has in his fingertips facts and figures which we do not know, and yet are of ultimate importance in resolving this slippery issue. Having said all that, Your Honors, let me inform the committee that we also spent considerable time discussing this matter when we were drafting the Bayanihan Constitution. Like Your Honors, we summoned the help of our experts, especially the economic experts, to shed light if there is a need to liberalize these economic restrictions in our Constitution. It was a puzzle then, and it is still a puzzle. And the many parts of the puzzle, I am afraid, are still moving parts and difficult to grasp. But our task was to draft a constitution. And the bottom line of our efforts is to protect the general welfare of our people. Consistent with this patriotic duty, Your Honors, we agreed to liberalize these economic restrictions. And we agreed to give to Congress the power to change the voting capital requirements by law, by the passage of the necessary laws. But even while we gave that power to Congress, we put a conditionality to the exercise of the power. We provided that the liberalization of the economic restrictions shall consider public welfare and national security. With this conditionality, the law that will be passed by Congress and the contracts that will be concluded pursuant to the law can be assailed in the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. We foresaw, Your Honors, that foreign capital in conjunction with local capital can conspire to wreak havoc on our national security and our public interest as they take advantage of the liberalization of these economic provisions. I respectfully submit
See here, Congresswoman who was with us in Cagayan de Oro, Vice Chair, Copilar, who is with us Jake here. And in Zoom, we have earlier, okay. Also, we'd like to welcome our additional resource persons with us today. Our former member of Congress, who is now the Undersecretary of Legislative Liaison Office of the DSWD, the Honorable Rowena Niña-Tadora. Thank you for coming.
Morning,
It's nice
Mr.
to see you.
Chair.
Former Majority Leader yan, always on the floor. And then
Thank
we
you.
have also USEC of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Attorney Juan Victor Liamas. Okay, so
Good
with
morning,
that,
sir.
we can proceed to the next. Sino pa? Tapos na. Christine. He's very much concerned about your DS, Deputy Speaker Christine. Tapos na. Okay, so we shall proceed now with the next resource person, and can the secretary, committee secretary, call on him.
Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis, Your Honor, sent his regrets because he is down with cold. And so the next speaker would be Mr. George T. Barcelon.
Yes. President Barcelona.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Honorable Congressman Rodriguez, for inviting the private sector to be here to voice some of their insights. But beforehand, I'd like to really feel very honored and privileged to have heard the former Chief Justice Renato Puno share his insights about our constitutions and issues that are of concern. In the beginning, Chairman, Congressman Rodriguez, you mentioned that you have been traveling to the different provinces, and this is the 7th consultation. And in so doing, you were able to get numbers, surveys from the feedback of those who attended. And I can see that you took a very prudent approach when there are two key issues that is crucial to what we're discussing. And again, I feel very privileged to be in the midst of all the honorable Congress person here, both men and women, who holds the future of our country in deliberating on this issue. As was mentioned, that the survey was done, the way I understood it, or the way you presented it, Chairman, is between the constitutional amendments, of course, is the overarching issue, but there's the other economic amendments. Okay? I would not dwell on the broad picture of the constitutional amendments. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a private citizen, but of course, all of these issues really concern us. As a representative of the private sectors, the economic amendments are more akin to our minds. Okay? As to answering the three questions that were posed, that were requested of the participants on whether we would like to have a constitutional amendments, I follow the wisdom of our leaders in Congress, wherein the urgency of this constitutional amendments weighs heavily. We on the private sector, of course, we do have other issues really more on economic side. So in our discussion among our fellow businessmen, we would put priority on the economic amendments. Okay? The urgency of the constitutional amendments is very broad, and as very well explained by former Chief Justice, moving forward, there are a lot of new issues that must be tackled. Okay? And I would like to think that given more time, our legislators would be able to come up with laws that would deal with some of them. As a matter of fact, what we have seen in the last 10 years, the formation of the Bangsamoro, the Mandanas-Garcia Act, wherein the devolution of the budgets, all of this are really to help out, have a broader base of economic development and for sustainability. And we do, we're cognizant of the effort that our legislators have put in. On the economic side also, we have seen that the previous administration under President Duterte has worked and made it happen on some of the laws, tax reform, to put our country in a better position to attract foreign investments. And of course, I'm referring to the CREATE law, to the PSA, and also to the retail trade liberalization. Now, all of this has in the trip that I have joined President BBM in the last few months, of course, Cambodia, Thailand, United States, and the last was Japan. January was China, and this opening up of our country is very well received from from countries that perceived that before we have certain conditionalities that does not really make our country attractive. So that's the sentiment of the private sector regarding on how to approach the constitutional amendments. Excuse me, let me take a drink. I noted that the former Chief Justice has laid out some of the options, and I would think that those are plausible options to be taken. I'm not in a position to say which way I prefer. I've seen in the past that, of course, I was not around for the 1935 Constitution, but I was around for 1973. I was around for 1987. And I can see that the Constitution was laid out in the way that it was vetted under those circumstances. The circumstances has really changed over the past so many decades. So again, I leave it to the wisdom of our elected officials and possibly appointed personalities to be included in this mission of dealing with our Constitution. I remember for 1987, there were private sectors that were appointed to be part of the Constitutional Convention. So having said that, I would like to end that I'm also a representative of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, in which this is among the 10 nations of ASEAN. And we're beginning to see, we have seen, or I have seen, that we are really behind the curve among the other ASEAN countries. Okay? We are now out of the 10, I think we are more like number 4. And the countries that I'm referring to the 4 countries that are coming up very fast. Okay? Mainly, of course, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos and Myanmar. And I hate to see that in the next 6 years, if we don't do something about it, as I shared my thoughts with some of the government officials, I said, if not now, when? Okay. Vietnam has overtaken us. Talking about foreign direct investment, it has a direct bearing on how the country conducts itself, not only from the national level, but also on the local government level. And this is something that we do have to recognize, that the Philippine Development Plan that was set out by NEDA, I think, is sound. It focused a lot on jobs, which we really need. Okay. We are cognizant, being the private sector side, that our economy is really part of it. Of course, it's through the resilience of our businessmen, but a big portion of that is depending on the remittances that we're getting from OFW. But I don't think we can rely on that forever. So whatever constitutional amendments that this auspicious committee is looking into, I hope it will address those issues for our country to move forward. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. George Barcelon. Thank you so much. Let's now proceed to the next resource person.
The head of legal services of ECOP, Your Honor, sends his regrets because of a family medical concern. So the next speaker is Attorney Benedicta Dick Do Baladad of Management Association of the Philippines. President.
Yeah.
Ah, no,
Attorney
sorry,
Velarde.
Sorry, I forgot. Attorney Pe will be the one who will represent MAP.
Yeah, we again recognize Attorney Pe, former Dean of Arellano University, former President of the Philippine Association of Law Schools. The floor is yours, Perry.
Thank you so much, Your Honors. Thank you so much, Dean Rufus.
And I forgot also my colleague who graduated also from the prestigious Columbia Law School.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was never a dean of the Arellano Law School, Your Honor. I'm still the current dean of the Palawan State University Law School. I've been a dean since 2003, and I'm still the dean right now. I'm the past president of the Management Association of the Philippines. I've been a lawyer since 1985. I studied the 1935 and the 1973 Constitution during law school. When I graduated, there was a revolution. It became the 1987 Constitution. So I think of all the batches, perhaps I would have a glimpse of all these three constitutions. I'm a senior partner of the Romulo Mabanta Law Offices. And in my everyday life, I have dealt with foreign investors practically every day since 1985. Every day until now, I'm dealing with foreign investors every day in and day out. And the number one complaint of the foreign investors, aside from infrastructure, is rule of law. Our consistency in our rule of law, especially our Constitution. Your Honors, we obviously support the changing or the amendment of our Constitution. We support what CJ Puno has said regarding amending our 1987 Constitution or even revising it. We support also having a CONCON or a constitutional convention. But we agree with CJ Puno's observation, and I think we have already mentioned this even before when CJ Puno was proposing the hybrid CONCON, which is the appointment of a constitutional convention plus the constituting elected officials and appointed officials. We think this would pave the way for our amendment of the 1987 Constitution. Having said those things and having set up that the 1987 Constitution needs to be amended, CONCON is the way to go, or if not, hybrid CONCON or a hybrid constitutional convention should be adopted. If, Your Honors, if you still cannot do a constitutional convention or a hybrid CONCON, we will accept the constituent, the CONAS or the Constituent Assembly. Halal po kayo ng bayan. We have to start. Somebody has to start the ball rolling. Somebody has to change the Constitution. And right now, it's only you, Your Honors, who can do it. No one else can do it. So kahit na po Constituent Assembly, pwede na po, gawin na natin. And if we have to go into the amending the Constitution, of course, our expertise in the MAP is not the political provisions. Our expertise is in the economic provisions. No matter what law we pass currently right now, whether we pass the Public Service Act, where we redefine what constitutes public utility, whether we pass the Retail Trade Liberalization Law, whether we pass the Foreign Investments Act liberalization, or even amending certain other provisions in our economic provisions or in our existing law right now, we would still be at the mercy of our Constitution simply because of three provisions in the Constitution that will derail or that will really affect any passage of any law. And may I mention these three as our suggestion to your honors and to the committee. The first one is Article 2, Section 19, which is found in the Declaration of Rights and Principles. Your honors, Article 2, Section 19 says, the state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy effectively controlled by Filipinos. Effectively controlled by Filipinos. The moment you have that, I doubt if we can pass any law where we open up our economy but still have to be effectively controlled by Filipinos. Malabo po. Hindi ho natin magagawa. Under the 1987 Constitution, in fact, all of the provisions there says, and even in Article 12, it says the state must have full control. There is only one provision in Article 12 that gives effective control, a provision in our Constitution, and that is the FTAA, or the Financial Technical Assistance Agreement. That by itself is the only effective control recognized by the Constitution. This is the only avenue where a foreigner can have 100% activity in any of our natural resources and do all of the economic activity despite the fact that a 60-40 is not embedded in the contract. 100%, the prime example of that is our Specs Malampaya, where the offshore activity, the discovery of natural gas was done by Shell and Chevron. The activity, a service contract was awarded to Shell and Chevron 100%, except for 10% which was given to PNOC Exploration Corporation. But the net proceeds of whatever is profited from that natural gas exploration is given 60-40 to the Philippine government, specifically to the DOE. That is contained in the service contract, which was done during the Cory Aquino days, and eventually commercial operation started during the GMA presidency. That is the only avenue where you can have effective control, but that is not enough, Your Honors. That is not enough. Recently, in the Supreme Court decision, where a joint marine seismic undertaking was asked, and it was questioned because of a joint marine survey undertaking by some Philippine corporations and some Chinese corporation. That thing was questioned, that contract was questioned before our Supreme Court, and what did the Supreme Court say? Even on testing, even if you're only doing seismic testing activity, that is already an exploration, and therefore must have full control. The moment we have that, we can never have any investor anymore along this, except through an FTAA. But an FTAA is so hard to secure. So, Your Honors, we would like to suggest, and we would like to propose, that instead of saying effectively controlled by Filipinos, maybe we can say consistent with its regional and international commitments. So if you will read, if I may be allowed to read a proposal for Article 2, Section 19, maybe we can say the state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy consistent with its regional and international commitments. That is our first proposal on the third issue that was raised by your honorable committee. The second issue that we would like to raise is Article 12, Section 10, Paragraph 2 of the 1987 Constitution, which says, quote, "In the grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony. The state shall give preference to qualified Filipinos. Qualified Filipinos. So even if a foreigner is more than qualified, it cannot be given to that foreigner. It must be given to a qualified Filipino. This was embedded in the case of the Manila Prince Hotel, decided way before. I think during the time of GMA, the President GMA at the time, or even before that. I think Ramos, President Ramos, qualified Filipinos. According to Father Bernas, that is really the Filipinization doctrine or the Filipino first policy. With this particular phrase, Your Honor, how can we attract foreign investors? No one will join because they're not a qualified Filipino. So in the case of the Manila Prince Hotel, you've got a Malaysian group, Malaysian Resort Hotel. In fact, it's Berhad, Genting Berhad. Very good. In Southeast Asia, they're probably one of the biggest resort developers and one of the biggest hotel owners. They bidded more than double what Manila Prince bidded for the privatization of Manila Hotel. But they lost out. They lost out because Manila Prince is a qualified Filipino and Genting is not. So perhaps what we can propose, Your Honors, is on Article 12, Section 10, maybe we can say in the grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony, the state shall give preference to qualified investors. Very simple. The third issue, Your Honors, if you don't mind, the third issue is something of a mystery as far as I'm concerned. I've never seen this in my entire lawyer life. And I'm talking about Article 12, Section 2, Section 22 of the 1987 Constitution. Article 12, Section 22. And it says, acts which circumvent or negate any of the provisions of this article, which talks about the national economy and patrimony of the nation, shall be considered inimical to the national interest and subject to criminal and civil sanctions as may be provided by law. So, Your Honors, if you have this and you start doing acts, or if you start circumventing any of the provisions of the 1987 Constitution, you can be subjected to civil and criminal sanctions. I think we should take this out altogether. This was never in the 1935 Constitution. This was never in the 1973 Constitution. Maybe we adopted this in our neighbors because this was contained in some of our neighbors' constitution, but never in the economic provisions of their own respective constitution. You put this in the economic provisions, what do you send to the foreign investors? Fear, Your Honors. Fear of investing in this beloved country of ours. Why? Because if someone says that their act becomes inimical to the national interest, that circumvention becomes inimical, and they be subjected to civil and criminal sanctions, of course, the first thing that they will come to mind, why should we invest in the Philippines? Why should we invest in the Philippines? And therefore, our proposal is simply to delete this particular provision, Your Honors. So, Your Honor, if we cannot have a con-con, if we cannot have a hybrid con-con, and if we have to adopt and change our 1987 Constitution, we propose a constituent assembly organized by this current Congress, restricted to all these three provisions only, restricting your ability to amend the 1987 Constitution and limiting it to these three provisions. That by itself is a win for all of us in the business community. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, in your honors, I think we will be able to pass better laws. We will be able to pass better foreign investment laws, better economic laws, better business laws, and for that, employment to our people. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Dean Perry. And we would like to therefore thank you. You have three specific proposals, which were very clearly elucidated, and the committee will surely take into account when we discuss what will be the decision of the committee in regards to the issues of the day. Amend the Constitution now, second, the mode, and third, what are the specific amendments? Thank you so much. Is there to recognize?
Yep.
Well,
The
So
next speaker,
we proceed with the next speaker.
the next speaker is Undersecretary Carlos Sorita of the DFA.
Secretary, recognize.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair, honorable members. Speaking after the Chief Justice and Dean of a law school, it behumbles this lowly attorney to speak briefly. And on the first question, whether it should be amended in context of the economic provisions, yes. In terms of the method, we leave it to the wise judgment of the people in the Congress. On the question on what provisions, isa po sa aming trabaho po, kasama ko si Assistant Secretary Dean Velasco, ambassador din po siya sa Roma, ako ambassador din sa ibang bansa. Isa po sa aming mga trabaho ay kumalap po ng investor. Humaharap po kami sa investor na interesado pang pumasok sa ating bansa. Believe sila sa ating labor, believe sila sa ating management. Dahil madalas nakatrabaho nila mga Pilipino sa ibang bansa. Nakita nila magagaling po ang ating mga trabahador, ang ating mga manager. Ngunit po pagdating sa issue ng equity, dahil gusto nila pagpapasok sila ng malaking halaga, ay they are willing to assume the risk, but they need to be sure that they have the control over the investment and efforts. Some investors have said they've tried nominees to go behind as a workaround to, for example, a 60-40. In the end, they end up spending much more, just to have nominees who actually just lend their name and hold in trust the equity. And so doing business that way, it's much more complicated. They'd rather go to another country, Ambassador Mr. Barcelona, so they go to other countries in our region. In terms of the other work we do, is we try to attract retirees to our country. It's a beautiful country. A lot of foreigners want to retire in our country, but they want to own their retirement home. They end up more often than not marrying a Filipina as a workaround. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think we have to be fair and honest to those who really want to retire and give them the opportunity to own the property. Right now, what we offer them is under the condominium law. We do offer, but the attraction to retiring in the Philippines is going to somewhere rustic, not living on the 17th floor of a condominium. So the retirees want to own, and they also want to invest. So what little they have, they want to invest, they want to own the investment. So it's very difficult for them. And lastly, sir, as mentioned by Dean, is joint development. The recent decision of the Supreme Court saying that we cannot enter into joint development activities with claimants in the South China Sea. The Constitution was supposed to protect our areas under our jurisdiction, but what the effect is, will prohibit us now. So if other claimants in the South China Sea decide to go ahead with joint development over the disputed areas, we would not be allowed to do it. And that would exclude us from joint developing the areas that we claim because of the restrictions in the Supreme Court. And we anticipate our 2005 agreement that was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court was between China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. We believe that China and Vietnam are eager to go into joint development themselves. They could exclude us, which means we would have to resort to other means to deter it or prevent it, which could lead to escalation rather than cooperation. Ang mundo po ngayon, Mr. Chair, honorable members, ay ang kapayapaan ay nasa-secure dahil po sa cooperation at multilateralism. Pag tayo po ay nagpa-partner sa isa't isa, wala pong rason para mag-away. We are deepening our economic relations with the rest of the world and with our region, most recently with RCEP. Ito pong mga arrangements na to ay investment po natin at ang ibang bansa sa kapayapaan. Dahil kung may kapayapaan, meron pong business, meron pong progress. Yung restrictive provisions ng Constitution ay maaari pong nagiging hadlang sa ating mas malalim na integration sa regional and global economy. Yung isang last point po, sir, is sa tingin po namin, ang amendments po, ang Constitution po hindi ho legislation. Ang Constitution po is organic, it's basic, it provides the broad strokes of policy that guides the three branches. So ang tingin po namin, maganda po yung mga proposal na narinig namin, konting tweaking lang but not drafting the amendments as if it's statute so that it leaves enough room for policy to be flexible. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary. It's good to know that our foreign service is working hard to bring in foreign investors to our country. That is to provide more job opportunities to our people. And also the fact that foreign retirees here certainly would wish to really invest. But the problem is there's the constitutional prohibition on land ownership. And of course, they marry and it's in the name of the wife. And then they lose their wives and they lose their property. So double jeopardy. So anyway, we consider your experience abroad on trying to get more retirees here. And so therefore they will retire to other places where they can have more hours on ownership. So with that, who's our next? Thank you very much, Undersecretary Soreta.
Would Assistant Secretary Nolasco like to add or we move on to the next?
We'd like to hear my good friend, Ambassador Domingo Nolasco. Whenever I travel, he's always there. And he always helps members of Congress. Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. In addition to what Undersecretary Soreta has mentioned, for us in the Department of Foreign Affairs, the proposed amendments are consistent with the recent trend in encouraging foreign investments. Specifically, Your Honors, we refer to a resolution of both houses, number 2 and 4, wherein the proposal is to add the phrase unless otherwise provided by law. For us, this is a proposal that the legislature and the legislators as representative of the people can immediately perhaps implement without tweaking or amending the whole Constitution. As Dean Perry has mentioned a while ago, wherein he proposed the specific amendments, perhaps we think that the phrase, adding the phrase unless otherwise provided by law, gives Congress the prerogative as our representatives to propose amendments without waiting for a whole constitutional, without waiting for the whole overall of the Constitution. So with this, Your Honor, we welcome that, but we also defer to other agencies in the government like the NEDA and Department of Trade and Industry on the economic policies on the government. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Domingo Nolasco. Thank you very much for your inputs. So we proceed to the next resource person.
The next resource person is Undersecretary Juan Victor Llamas of the DILG.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
So the Secretary, you are
Good morning, Your
recognized.
Honors. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Gusto ko lang pong i-report ang contribution po ng aming departamento. Kung malala po ninyo, former President Rodrigo Duterte created an interagency task force on constitutional reform, federalism and constitutional reform. And an offshoot of that, ang aming pong department, ang DILG, we also created our own center. Ito po ay project management office ng aming department, originally called Center for Federalism and Constitutional Reform. But later on, we changed it to Center for local and constitutional reform, which conducted roadshows, town hall meetings, consultations since 2019 pa po. And as a result of that, we created eto po, meron po nagawa po ang aming department, core constitutional reform handbook, which we want to share to the committee para malaman po ninyo kung ano po yung result po ng mga consultations na ginawa po ng aming departamento. Basically po, ang reforms po na nilalaman po nitong libro na ito ay on fiscal strengthening of the local government units, on empowerment of the Regional Development Council. Meron pa po siyang political and electoral reforms. Kasama po rito yung strengthening of political parties as a democratic public institutions, campaign finance reform. Nandyan din po ang restriction on political turncoatism. And then, meron po ditong liberalizing, no, yung citizenship-based restrictions on foreign direct investment. It's all here, Your Honors. Nandito po yung specific provisions which we will share to all of you. Sir, thank you po.
Thank you very much. I am very much aware of the core, and you have done this since 2019. And certainly, you now have a book based on your road shows you have gone all over the country. And so therefore, we will be very happy to accept a copy of that so that it will be part of the records of this committee and really considered when we decide on how to proceed with the amendments or the mode. And I'd just like to congratulate one of your, was he the chairman or the president, Attorney Reville? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
he has
Core
just been
movement
appointed
person. Yes, sir.
as head of the LUA. So congratulations. He was here in the last hearing, Attorney, former Vice Governor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
The members of our centers are here, Your Honor, and still they are mandated by department to continue do the research and study, being our think tank in our department to study constitutional reforms, Your Honor.
Thank you. Can the members please stand up and please record yourselves because you should be in the our minutes. Thank you so much. No? They have been going around the country, not only for national changes, but especially on local governments, strengthening the regional development councils. That is one of those. And we would certainly, probably, if there is a constitutional convention, then that can be a good material, just like the output of Chief Justice Puno's commission. So thank you. Please submit the book to our committee. Thank you for that input and the book. Thank you very much. Let's now proceed to the next resource person.
The next resource person is Attorney Marjorie Ramos Samaniego of the Board of Investments. She's the governor.
Yes, Tanyera, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for the invitation to the DTI, the Trade and Industry, and the BOI, Mr. Chairman. Just to be okay, on the three main areas of interest by the committee, Mr. Chair, let me just provide the viewpoints coming from the trade industry and the Board of Investments on whether it is necessary to amend or revise the Constitution. The DTI remains committed to improve the Philippine investment climate, and the economic legislative reforms that were passed by the previous Congress are the impetus that the agency are harping on. These include the recent liberalization measures that allowed the entry of foreign investors under the public amendments to the Public Service Act, the Retail Trade Liberalization Law, and the Foreign Investment Act. It also includes, of course, the CREATE Law. So this, we see these amendments as game changers. However, Mr. Chairman, we still note that several foreign equity restrictions are still enshrined in the Constitution, rather than in an investment law or a sectoral legislation, which makes actually more economic reforms challenging, Mr. Chairman. So the constitutional restrictions on foreign equity limitations were common as previously stated in the earlier decades. However, it is now unusual in many parts of the world. Indeed, Mr. Chair, I think we're the only two countries that have economic restrictions, the prohibition on foreign limitations that are enshrined in the Constitution. One is Myanmar. So now, Mr. Chairman, we see, well, of course, we know all the equity restrictions, which includes even public utilities, mass media, advertising, educational institution, utilization of marine and natural resources. And it has been shown that this practice of providing it in the Constitution is really not the best practice. It's almost always that such restrictions would be in investment laws or a sectoral legislation. Hence, Mr. Chairman, for the DTI and the BOI, we see that the approach that was filed by Honorable Representative Lord Alan Velasco, entitled "The Resolution of Both Houses Proposing Amendments to Certain Economic Provisions of the Constitution, particularly Article 12, Article 14, and Article 16, would be the best option that we are looking at, Mr. Chair, in amending the economic provisions of the Constitution. On the mode of amendment or revision, Mr. Chair, considering the complexity of amending or revising the Constitution and the humongous task ahead, we leave it to the wisdom of the Congress on the approach to be taken. Mr. Chairman, noting as well that now it could also be a hybrid CONCON, Mr. Chairman. Now on the specific proposal, as stated, Mr. Chair, for the DTI and the BOI, we would be interested in amending the economic provisions under the Constitution, which includes Article 12, mass media, practice of law, Article 8, utilization of marine resources, Article 12, and Article 14 and Article 15, which are all covered by the proposal of Representative Velasco, Mr. Chair. So that's it for the DTI and the BOI, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Samaniego. We appreciate the views from the DTI and the BOI. We would like to recognize the presence of our Minority Leader, Honorable Marcelino Libanan, as well as Deputy Majority Leader, Honorable Julian Jam Baronda on Zoom. ComSec, our next resource speaker, please.
Your Honors, it will be Attorney Crystal Lynn Tanoy of NEDA.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to share our views on the House Bill resolutions. So consistent with what our colleagues from the DFA and the DTI has said, NEDA would be open to revisiting or amending the restrictive economic provisions as embodied in the House Bill resolutions number 2 and 4 that was introduced by Honorable Velasco and Tambunting. Of course, our support for the amendments of the economic provisions is limited to that and not to any other provisions of the Constitution. This is in line with, of course, the goal of propelling our growth our global position upward. And we also note, however, that if indeed there is the exercise will push through, it can actually have substantial costs that can be that must be weighed carefully, considering that the country is only emerging from the pandemic. And so we have to see the internal calculations for the cost of CONCON or a CONAS, Constitutional Assembly, and whether these can be spent on any other projects or priority legislative agenda of Congress. So that is our position, Your Honors.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Attorney Crystal Uy of NEDA for your views. The next resource person is
The Executive Director, Your Honors of the ULAP, Ms. Eileen Licano.
Good
Ms.
morning.
Licano is recognized. Yes.
Good morning to the honorable members of the committee. Mr. Chair, may I be allowed to read the letter of Governor Kua regarding the questions in the committees?
Please proceed.
All right. Governor Kua, I support the initiative of the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments in opening the discussion to amend the Philippine Constitution. The decision to amend the Constitution is a complex one that requires careful consideration and evaluation of potential benefits and drawbacks. Nonetheless, whether through the process of Constituent Assembly or Constitutional Convention, we can clearly see that some changes are necessary to address the various challenges that the country is facing. For the local government units, local autonomy as enshrined in the 1987 Constitution have resulted in a more decentralized structure, which has helped promote greater participation and improve the delivery of public services. However, there are still issues that need to be addressed, such as ensuring that LGUs have the necessary resources and capacity to effectively carry out their responsibilities. In this respect, the enhancement of the Constitution should embrace the pursuit of genuine local autonomy for our local government units. That is it, Mr. Chairman, for the letter from Governor Kua regarding the constitutional amendment.
Thank you very much, and we will accept that letter to be part of the records. Our thanks to Governor Kua,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
our former member of the House. And so the next resource person will be Assistant Secretary for Administration and Department Legislative Liaison Specialist of the DA, Attorney Jane Bacayo. You're
Good morning,
recognized.
Mr. Chair and the honorable members of this committee. The Department of Agriculture supports the move to amend the 1987 Constitution. Constitutional reform presents an opportunity to pose for good governance by changing the rules to promote more accountability, transparency, participation, and predictability in the way the government conducts its business. As to the first question, which is whether or not it is necessary to amend the Constitution, the department views it is necessary, in fact, an urgent need to amend certain provisions of the Constitution, notably on the economic front. The provisions have hampered our economic progress. It is time to remove the impediments and allow normal legislation to deal with the protection concerns of our nationalistic interest. As to the mode of amending the Constitution, we believe that the method of undertaking the amendments through a constituent assembly would be the most expeditious process. It is also the most cost-effective way to accomplish the task. However, the department would be amenable to whatever would be the judgment of the committee as to the mode of amending the provisions of the Constitution. As to the proposed specific amendments, we propose that the amendment should be limited to the economic provisions of the Constitution, Your Honor. That's all, Your Honor, for the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Paniero Bacayo. And so thank you for the inputs of the Department of Agriculture. So next, last but not the least, our fellow former colleague of the House of Representatives, former Deputy Majority Leader, Yusek Rowena Nina Taduran, representing the DSWD.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the honorable members of this committee. May I read to you the position paper of the department, Your Honor, Mr. Chair?
Kindly proceed.
The Department of Social Welfare and Development supports the bills and resolutions that seek to amend the 1987 Philippine Constitution And we commend the authors of the bills in initiating the change in the form of government and adjust the mode of elections and to ease up the economic provisions to help the Filipino people. We believe amending the 1987 Philippine Constitution, particularly on the economic provision, is timely and necessary on certain provisions that are already outdated and are no longer relevant in the context of the present economic situation. We support the introduction of provisions on economic reform targeting economic recovery, like removing the barriers to foreign investment in order to attract foreign investors so as to ultimately provide benefits in terms of employment, transfer of technology and know-how, management skills, income, and a better quality of life for the Filipinos. This consider readying the business climate, particularly on the political, economic, social, technological, environment, and legal aspects. Likewise, the Philippines, similar to other countries, should exert extra efforts to attract investors by providing them necessary infrastructure, incentives, and a much labor force to meet their requirements. Thereby, intensify the massive support system on soft and hard infrastructure programs and social capital to achieve the improved social and economic standing in the present time. Consistent with the Philippine Development Plan 2023-2028, the country needs to position certain social and economic recovery actions to achieve the matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. And finally, Mr. Chair, the SWD has already submitted a position paper on several House measures calling for the amendments of the Constitution. Thus, I request this honorable committee to make use of it for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Yusek Nina, and thank you for the position of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Now we'll start with the open forum. To preside over the open forum, where we have the interpellators from Congress, or those in Zoom, just signify your intention to ask questions to our resource persons, and we'll recognize you to those in Zoom. We have now a list, and so may I turn over the open forum side to our senior Vice Chairperson, Nonoy Defensor.
Thank you, Chairman. First on the list, we have the Deputy Minority Leader. I would like to recognize Congressman Paul Daza for his questions. Senior Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed on the list our senior lawmaker from the majority, Congressman Barzaga. I will yield to him if he would like to go first.
Thank you very much, my dear friend. I wish to state initially that upon hearing all our resource persons, they are unanimous in their opinion that there is a need for charter change. So I would seek some clarification coming from our eminent Chief Justice Renato Puno. I fully agree with this proposal that a hybrid constitutional convention would be acceptable to the people. Because based on experience way back in 1971, I've seen that most of the Constitutional Convention delegates were backed by political leaders in the province of Cavite. Insofar as the hybrid election is concerned, hybrid Constitutional Convention is concerned, I would ask the Chief Justice that insofar as election and providing for a number of appointees under the law creating the Constitutional Convention, there will be no legal infirmity.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you for the question. All we have in the Constitution is the grant of power to Congress to call for a constitutional convention. You look over the provision, there are no restrictions whatsoever on how this power will be exercised. So I take it that the grant of this power is the grant of full powers. And therefore, I see no constitutional impediment if Congress, would call for a constitutional convention with a hybrid membership.
Mr. Chief Justice, you have mentioned that you were the chairman in the consultative assembly created by the former president. And in that consultative assembly, you were able to draft a proposed constitution. Based on your experience, what do you think would be the ideal number of delegates necessary to formulate a new and effective constitution answering the needs of the Filipino people?
Again, Your Honor, if the work of the constitutional convention will be limited to the examination only of the restrictive economic provisions, I suppose that the membership will not be as big as when the convention is tasked with the revision of the Constitution. And I like to believe that the membership here should be more limited to the experts, especially the economic experts. So that said, the objection against an expensive constitutional convention would not be a valid objection.
Following up, sir, you have mentioned that there are certain aspects in our present constitution that have to be amended or revised. Number one, we have to include social and economic rights because the present constitution covers only civil and political rights. You have likewise mentioned that there is a need to address the Bangsamoro Islamic law, considering that there is a pending petition before the Supreme Court. And also, insofar as liberalizing the economic provision is concerned, there must be conditionalities, namely that the liberalization must take into consideration public welfare as well as national security. Can the law creating or calling for a constitutional convention include these provisions in such a manner that it will be binding insofar as the constitutional convention delegates are concerned?
My submission, Your Honor, is that this can be recommendations on the part of Congress. But we have the principle that if you call for a constitutional convention, you cannot unnecessarily limit the powers of the constitutional convention. And therefore, proceeding from that premise, perhaps these thoughts can just take the form of suggestions and recommendations, which are non-binding to the members of the Constitutional Convention. Otherwise, their independence would be unnecessarily impaired.
And we can also include in the proposal, in the bill, in the law creating the Constitutional Convention, that we might suggest to them that the draft constitution of pure consultative body be included in their deliberation.
Well, again, Your Honor, the question is one of priorities. If it may the present Congress may just be mindful of focusing on restricting the lifting the restrictive economic provisions, perhaps because that is more called for by the times. But of course, Congress may also call for a constitutional convention that will be tasked with having an overarching view of all the provisions of the Constitution. But again, and this is subject to the judgment of Congress on questions of priorities and the necessities of the times.
As mentioned earlier, sir, Congress has the power to call for a hybrid election insofar as the Constitutional Convention members are concerned. If we provide in the law itself the manner of making appointments in order that only those experts or those who are qualified will be appointed, will it be valid on the part of the law to include only appointment without any election in order to minimize the expenses?
That will depend on how expansive a reading you will give to the power of Congress to call for a constitutional convention. As I said before, the composition can be defined by Congress itself in the law calling for a constitutional convention. In other words, Congress may say that only the only members of the convention will be the elected ones, or it may call for a hybrid composition of the convention. Your question goes to the extreme where Congress may just call for a convention that is strictly composed of appointed members. Maybe this question addresses less the constitutionality of that exercise of power, but more addresses the wisdom of it.
And finally, Chair, the 1987 Constitution was drafted by a group of persons appointed by the President at the time. Although we know for a fact that during that time, what we had was a revolutionary form of government. Could that power to appoint be not exercised in having the members of the Constitutional Convention?
Yes, as you observe, the members of the Constitutional Commission that drafted the 87 Constitution was purely appointed. And that was a consequence of the 1986 revolution. In other words, at that time, we had a revolutionary situation. And in a revolutionary situation, whoever is in power is less restricted by laws because you have a situation of a revolution. But to my mind, the important thing is that that 87 Constitution was ratified by the people. And so whatever misgivings you may have with respect to its composition, the stubborn fact is that it was ratified by the sovereign people. It's a ratification by the exercise of the sovereign power of the people.
So in short, finally, that once the Constitution has been ratified, any issue pertaining to its creation, composition will no longer be necessary because there has been already a ratification by the sovereign will of our people.
Yeah, I agree, Your Honor. I submit that the ultimate judge of all objections to the Constitution would be the sovereign people.
And finally, last final point, in the event that we pass a law creating or calling for a constitutional convention, it could be the subject of an attack before the Supreme Court on the ground that certain provisions might be unconstitutional.
The challenge may be premature because the convention has not produced anything. Perhaps the attack on the constitutionality would relate to the manner how the convention was called with respect to its composition and so on and so forth. But as I said, that will be a difficult constitutional challenge to make in view of the power granted by the Constitution to our Congress, which I said does not appear to have any kind of limitation.
A law creating the constitutional convention will be considered an exercise of the plenary power of Congress, not constituent powers.
That's right, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Representative Barzaga, for that interesting questions. And thank you, Chief Justice, for your concise answers. Before we continue, we would like to acknowledge the presence of Honorable Gus Tambunting from 2nd District of Parañaque City. So now let's proceed with the interpellation. May we call back Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Daza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Considering the minority leader is here, he indicated to me he had one question. I will yield again to Minority Leader Nonoy Libanan.
Honorable Marcelino Libanan, the Minority Leader, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And thank you, Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Daza. Mr. Chairman, the hardworking and very efficient and brilliant chairman of this committee. And I would like to ask a question to the Honorable Crystal Tanoy of NEDA on your statement that it depends on the cost which will be incurred via constitutional convention or constituent assembly, where you would support this initiative of amending the Constitution. My question is, do you have a study on what will be the benefit of our country if we amend the restrictive provisions of the Constitution?
Thank you for that question, Your Honor. So currently, we have an internal estimated cost for a constitutional convention. And it is, if it's going to be held as a separate national election and national plebiscite, the total cost would be 28 billion pesos. If it will be held simultaneously with the next barangay or national elections, the cost will go down to 331 million. If the cost is for a separate national plebiscite of a constituent assembly, the estimated cost is 13.8 billion pesos. And if it's a constituent assembly that will be held simultaneously with the next barangay or national elections, it will be 30 million pesos.
So it will be of lesser cost if it goes with a national or local election. Is that correct? Now, my second question is, how much would the country benefit if indeed we amend these provisions of the Constitution?
So we don't have any specific study that will specifically looks at each of the restrictive provisions and quantitatively determine the benefit for that. However, we recognize that there have been, since we are in a position that we want to attract foreign investments and promote trade and investments, lifting these economic provisions could redound to a lot of benefit for the Philippine economic development. We can internally look at whether or not we have such figures, and we will furnish this body. However, we also note that the three laws that was recently passed to liberalize our economy on retail trade or liberalization, the Amendment of Public Service Act and the Foreign Investments Act, could be expected to yield a lot of economic benefits. However, since this was only recently passed, we don't have any firm quantitative data for that as of yet. We also note that there are other legislative matters that will generate a lot of benefits for us, especially in the field of ICT infrastructure. As mentioned by Attorney Pe, we have actually a lot of pending legislative bills for improving the quality of ICT in the Philippines. And these can also be alongside with this measure that is being deliberated on right now, can be prioritized by the legislature to ensure that we have foreign investments and trade and investments.
Thank you, ma'am. Kindly provide us with all this data, the economics of it, because we have to face the people here and explain to them why we are doing this. And it is NEDA who can help us on this direction. Another question is, tayo po'y representatives of the people here. At marami nang tayong pinag-uusapan tungkol sa amendment of the Constitution, especially on the restrictive provisions. Ano ang nakikita ng NEDA dahil you're on top of it? Have you conducted a research kung sinong may gusto, ilan porsyento ang may gusto, at anong classification, A, B, C, D, E? Do we have that figures? Because dapat kami dito, we are the voice of the people. Kung walang, mayroon na tayong mga surveys dito, di ba? May SWS tayo, Pulse Asia. Did we do that? You have to properly guide us on this.
So currently, we have to check if there is any available information pertaining to the question. However, I understand that there may be other agencies that have actually conducted a particular survey, so we might coordinate with them to be able to provide that.
Kindly do so. With NEDA, we cannot be wrong kung saan tayo papunta dito. If we are with the people, we cannot be wrong. Whatever is the cost, this is the fundamental law of the land we are talking about.
Yes, sir.
And at this point, we have to be with our people here.
Yes, sir. I think we definitely have studies that we can furnish on the cost that we are missing out because of certain economic restrictions. So we can provide that to this body.
Kindly give us a ma'am.
Sige po.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minority Leader Libanan. We acknowledge the presence of Deputy Speaker Honorable Aurelio Dong Gonzales Jr. Next to interpolate is Deputy Majority Leader Wilter Palma.
Thank you very much. Morning again. Just want to address this to our Chief Justice. Sir, which do you prefer? A revision or just an amendments to the Constitution?
My personal preference, Your Honor, is to revise the Constitution and not just to introduce piecemeal amendments. I think it would be better for the country if we take a holistic look at all these problems, which cannot be separated in watertight compartments. These problems, political, social, economic, interlock with each other. And so, to my mind, we are going to examine the Constitution. Let us do so exhaustively. And let us not count the cost of calling for a convention. I look at the cost as more of our investment in the future. These are investments. Investments to secure our future. So that is my respectful submission, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. As what Attorney Dean Perry was saying kanina, that there are only 3 amendments which he's proposing. Would that comprise the total, would that address the economic as well as other provisions that we want to? Because Justice Puno is for the total revision, and you're saying that you want to have only 3 amendments that you're proposing. Would that jive with the position of Justice Puno?
Your Honor, obviously, if we have to change the Constitution, Justice CJ Puno is correct. We cannot do piecemeal legislation. We have to revise the entire thing. But we, being businessmen, are realistic enough to understand this our situation. At the same time, also, when we face a situation where a total revision versus a non-revision at all, where do we go? Do we just sit here forever, discuss the constitutional amendments, discuss all of these things? Because we've been discussing this since the time of, I think, President Estrada. And we haven't had any real constitutional amendment. So what we've been doing, we introduced the Public Service Act, we liberalized the retail trade law, we liberalized the Foreign Investments Act. We even, through a DOJ opinion, we even redefine what constitutes renewable energy. So we even suggested House bill to put in place unless otherwise provided by law, simply to be able to change certain provisions of our Constitution. Realizing this, Your Honor, we thought that if we could only focus on these 3 items that I have raised earlier on, maybe what we can do is call for a constituent assembly, restrict the power of that constituent assembly to only amending those 3 provisions. And then we think that if you take out all those 3 provisions, we can now pass better laws and we can now pass better economic provisions for our country. Of course, that's not to say that the political provisions will be taken care of. No, I'm practical enough to understand that within the few years that we have, and within the time limit that we have, within your term situation that we have to be realistic enough to understand that we can only do so much. But Congress has to start. No one else will start except you, Your Honor. No one else. Not the President, no one else but this Congress.
Thank you, Dean. Again, I just want to address this to Chief Justice. Sir,
what do you prefer? Unicameral or bicameral form po? The system that you want to. Since and under your proposed revision to the Constitution.
Your Honor, when we drafted the Bayanihan Federal Constitution, we opted for a federal government where there are two houses. But of course, the composition and the powers of the two houses are different from the powers that we see in our 1987 Constitution. The powers, the range of power has to be adjusted in accordance with the federal form of government. And since it's a federal form of government, we also propose a strong executive that is to ensure that this is a form of government that is quite different from the kinds of government we have had before. And therefore, there is a need for a strong government so that there will be an insurance that the federation will not suffer from any kind of division or split or the exit of some regions.
Right. Thank you. Lastly, sir, during the discussion of the economic provision, you mentioned about public welfare and national security. Can you please expound on that reservation that you have?
Thank you, Your Honor. In our draft federal constitution, we thought that it would be wise to impose this condition. That even if we give this power to Congress to liberalize the restrictive economic provisions, nevertheless, we like to think that the exercise of the power should not run riot. In other words, we put hedges, protective hedges, in case there will be an arbitrary exercise of power. So we put that conditionality, that the exercise of this power shall be subject always to the requirements of national security and to the general interest of the people. By that, by imposing that restriction, the government, in case there is a necessity for it, can always question the law and the contracts that may be entered into upon on these grounds, national security and general interest. And this is again because we have seen how economic power has been used as a weapon to capture governments. And this has happened in other countries. And so we want that safety provision. After all, in the hierarchy of values, the highest always is the general interest of the people. And up there always is the national security. So we made those safety provisions. We proposed those safety provisions.
Would it be, sir, would it be if we can ask your official position paper duly signed by you so that for the benefits of this committee, or will just, Mr. Chair, would that be the transcript already will serve as the official statement of the good Chief Justice, or whichever you prefer, Mr. Justice?
If requested, Your Honor, we'll be glad to give a better, more comprehensive exposition of this proposal.
Our pleasure, Mr. Chief Justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Wilter Palma. The chair would like to inform the body that this is a working session, so you may partake your lunch as we go with the interpellations. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge the presence via Zoom of Deputy Majority Leader David J.J. Suarez, and of course, Honorable J.C. Abalos from 4-Piece Party List. Next to interpolate is, we go back to Senior Minority Leader Paul Daza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to my colleagues, and good morning to all our distinguished resource persons. It's been an honor to have heard from all of you. I'd like to ask Madam Chair, in a nutshell, the Chief Justice mentioned earlier during the Duterte administration, I believe he was the chair of a commission that brought in experts and came up with the Bayanihan federalism proposed constitutional amendments. Could you expound a little bit more, because I don't recall who participated, and but I do recall it was probably the #1 agenda of the former president. Could you just shed a little bit more light regarding that?
Come again, Your Honor.
Please repeat your question, Honorable Daza.
May I ask the Chief Justice just to share a little bit more details on that commission that he headed that drafted the so-called mentioned Bayanihan Constitution? Who participated? Who were the experts? And a little bit of details, because I assume the COMSEC received a copy of that, and I'd like to go through that for guidance.
Your Honor, may I just enumerate the members of the commission who were appointed by former President Duterte. You have here Mr. Arthur Aguilar, an economist, graduate of Harvard University. You have also Professor Eddie Ali. Is a prominent Muslim, and I think now a member of the Bangsamoro. He's a professor, an academic. You have, of course, Father Ranhilo Aquino, the Dean of the Graduate Studies of San Beda Law School. He is a very eminent member of the legal profession, very productive in the writing of books and articles, and considered the foremost legal philosopher now in the matter of the subject of philosophy of the law. And then you have Antonio Arellano, a lawyer, also I think a dean now of one of the law schools in Mindanao, a former city or state prosecutor. You have Attorney Ali Balindong, the who belongs to the Balindong political family, and now the deputy speaker of the Bangsamoro Parliament. You have Dr. Virgilio Bautista, again an academic, president of a university from the city of Baguio. And then you have Attorney Ferdinand Bocobo, a general in the I think in the police, and he provided the needed knowledge when it comes to national security. You have Attorney Ruben Canoy, very prominent in Mindanao, in Cagayan de Oro, and you have all these people, justices from the Supreme Court, bar top notchers. You have all of them.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, could you recall, Chief Justice, what year that was? I think it was early on during the Duterte administration.
That's right, Your Honor, and we were able to finish the drafting of the Constitution in 5 or 6 months' time. In fact, we did not spend all the money that was appropriated for the commission. We even returned some 50 million to the executive department.
Madam Chair, would the good Chief Justice remember how much was spent during that time?
I don't have the exact number, but I know for a fact that we returned some 50 million pesos of our budget, and we were able to finish the job, revising, coming out with a new constitution in 6 months' time. So if we focus on this economic provisions alone, I don't see how the convention will consume a lot of time revising our constitution in order to lift the severity of the economic provisions in the 87 Constitution.
Madam Chair, I'm sure the work product of that commission headed by the Chief Justice, I'm sure was high level, sure very good. Did the President support the proposed amendments that was produced by your group, Madam Chair?
Yes, Your Honor, the problem which we encountered came from, especially from the upper chamber of this Congress. The chairman of the Senate committee at that time, Committee on Revision of the Constitution, was not very sympathetic with the idea of revising the Constitution. In fact, they were saying that that draft is dead on arrival on the halls of Senate.
So meaning, Madam Chair, the President Duterte had supported that. I'm assuming the House then supported it, and it did not progress because of the Senate. Is that correct?
Mainly the obstacle was posed by the Senate. As you said, the House was sympathetic to the provisions of the draft Constitution.
So what would be the Chief Justice recommendation to the House, having experienced the obstacle in the past administration?
Well, again, this is a question of judgment on the part of Congress. As Attorney Pe was saying, it's a question of taking one step at a time. Yeah. Perhaps calling for a total revision of the Constitution would be problematic, considering that it's natural to resist radical changes.
Well, Madam Chair, well, I wanted to prompt a response, maybe also from Attorney Pei representing the private sector. It seems that in the past administration, we had a president who was elected, who's extremely popular, elected with one of his campaign promises was constitutional amendment, federalism. The work was done by no less than a former Chief Justice, but it still did not move. So I can't see what would be the difference now. We have a similar situation. So what would be the advice? Well, of any of the resource persons, maybe even Attorney Pei.
Your Honor, that's the reason why we're saying if we have to amend our constitution, let's just concentrate on those three provisions which I cited. It's really very hard to change our constitution because we've got two chambers. The CJ Puno is correct that suggestion really ran counter and met difficulty in the Senate. It also met difficulty with some members of the cabinet, also President Duterte at the time. But that did not stop us from the private sector from supporting the initiative. In fact, at the time, if I can recall right, the question was whether you are in favor of the federal form of government, and the only issue then was how many number of regions that you have. Even Prime Minister Virata, if I can recall right, wanted only 5. Senator Pimentel wanted 15 or something like that. It gained support. However, because of the Senate, it did not get enough votes. And being realistic enough, Your Honor, being pragmatic enough, I thought that for this committee, maybe if we concentrate on just those three provisions, Article 2, Section 19, Article 12, Section 10, Paragraph 2, and the fearsome Article 12, Section 22, that threatens investors of criminal and civil sanction if we do try to circumvent any of the articles in the Constitution or in the economic provisions, threatening them with economic and civil sanctions. If we can just change those three provisions without touching on the rest in the meantime, maybe we can progress. Maybe the laws that can be passed by Congress will be better and not questioned before the Supreme Court right away. As I've said earlier on, in certain privatization deals, the deal was questioned before the Supreme Court. The joint seismic activity conducted, even purely on pre-exploration, even purely on testing, was also questioned. The Public Service Act is also being questioned. Retail trade nationalization law is also being questioned. If you're a foreign investor trying to go to the Philippines and trying to invest here, what do we have? We have a situation where we adopt, on one hand, the foreign investors' wishes, but on the other hand, we really do not want them in because of certain limitations that we have. And that's the reason why, Your Honor, we propose these three, lifting of these three provisions, Your Honor.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Now, well, to continue on that same line of thinking, are there any, this is the second hearing I've attended, Madam Chair, are there any industry associations that are against amending the economic provisions?
Well, from the MAP perspective, not to my knowledge, and the MAP is made up of certain of the top CEOs and COOs of the country. Mr. Barcelon would have those numbers because he's from the PCCI. Not to my knowledge, Your Honor. I may be mistaken, but not to my knowledge.
So, Madam Chair, it would be safe, it would be fair to say that most trade and industry associations support amending the economic provisions.
You're correct. You're correct, Your Honor. In fact, even the DTI is supporting us.
Okay, Madam Chair, I would say my first love as a college student was economics. I remember in my college years, trade economics was fairly simple. If a country was very good in producing bananas, but maybe not good in producing television set, then you trade with another country that's better with TV, and that's really the economic gain. You trade with partners that are good in other things that you're not good in. Now, my understanding is for the Philippines, our biggest trade partners are the US, China, Australia, and I think some countries in Western Europe. My question is to, well, any of the resource persons, have there been any trade partners who we have substantial economic trade with that have taken a position either for or against the certain economic provisions in our Constitution?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, of course, as earlier stated, for or against, that's the Manila Hotel that Attorney Pe stated earlier, and that on the JMSU. There are several issues on cold storage, for example, before the amendment of the Public Services Act. But essentially, Mr. Chairman, there are cases against. It's normally against the economic provisions.
So my question, Madam Chair, which countries, have there been any official positions from any country regarding this particular issue on our economic provisions? You know, the restrictive foreign capital and foreign ownership, the foreign direct investment restrictions. Would the DFA, DTI, NEDA have any information on that? Because to me, for this representation, that's a consideration when this proposed bills go to vote in the committee and on the floor. Because I think as a student of economics, that there's value in a country to have reciprocity in terms of laws, economic doctrines, and principles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, it's on the OECD investment policy review have noted investment restrictions under our Constitution. And of course, we would also know, Madam Chair, that every time we do investment promotions, really in mining, for example, so it's 60-40. So obviously you could see already why we have less foreign direct investments, because instead of having the 100 million, for example, only 40% can be infused by foreigners. But essentially it's always being raised, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, that's what I'm seeing. Most of the reports that we would have would note the restrictions. OECD is one that has been very vocal in saying that we're the third most restrictive economy amongst 147 global economies, around that figure, Madam Chair.
Well,
Honorable Daza, from the Foreign Affairs, they will also like to answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, usually other countries hesitate to comment on the internal laws of other countries. They usually are a little more finessed and will speak through other channels. And those channels for us are the foreign chambers here. I think to a single person, if you speak to the foreign chambers of commerce and maybe we can get from the private side, they have made many comments on. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I thank you for that. I think you're correct. I just wanted to put it on the record. But I'll put on the record because I have spoken to the president of European Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Lark, and they are supportive of amending the economic. Would any of the other resource persons care to add anything on that topic?
Your Honor, not exactly on that topic, but let me just say that from the business sectors, we have a near unanimity on the need to loosen up these economic restrictions. But that is on the side of the business sector of our society. On the other hand, we do have opposition, a diverse view coming from other organizations. And I refer to the opinions of organizations, individuals who belong to the left of the ideological spectrum. We have individuals, organizations from of the human rights group that fear the impact of the liberalization of these economic restrictions on human rights. And we have also individuals, organizations coming from the poorer sector of our society that look up at this opening of these economic provisions with the opinion that this will not benefit the poor, but will prejudice the poor some more.
Madam Chair, thank you for those comments, but just to go back again about, I'm fascinated why in the last Congress, despite the pronouncements of the president, who essentially got what he wanted, the proposed amendments got stuck in the Senate. Is it, and this is for any resource persons just to guide us, would it be safe to state that the reluctance of the Senate was probably due to the possibility of amending the political provisions rather than just the economic provisions? Would anyone care to comment on that?
Yes, Your Honor, that is an accurate observation. For instance, in our draft federal constitution, we have a provision there that is self-executive in abolishing political dynasties. And that is a very controversial provision that would affect a lot of interest in the Senate. And then, you have a new constitution that would divide the powers of government between the federal group and the subgroups. Just that division of powers, how you divide the power, is very controversial. It is natural that the national government would resist all these attempts to diminish their powers.
With your indulgence, Chief Justice, thank you for that. But just to highlight, it seems to be that if we were to move on amending the economic provisions of the Constitution, the stumbling block has been the Senate. And it seems to be that their concern is related to the possibility of the political provision amendments. If that is the case, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, okay, just to continue on that train of thought, and I think the good Deputy Speaker will appreciate my line of questioning. For the record, Madam Chair, if we pass legislation to create a constitutional convention, regardless of the composition, let's not address that. Is it correct to state that we cannot restrict the agenda and or the provisions that that convention can take up? Because it's a quasi-sovereign body. There's been opinion that should there be a constitutional convention, it's sovereign, and therefore the Congress cannot predetermine the discussions and the topics that they will put in their agenda. Is that a fair statement to both our constitutional experts?
Yes, Your Honor. And that is an open question. Of course, we have the learning given to us that a constitutional convention is a sovereign with respect to the exercise of its powers. It is sovereign. It is independent. It is not subject to any kind of restriction on the part of Congress and the other branches of government. But that is one school of thought. You read further, you cannot find any decision of the High Court on that matter. And so I say it's an arguable issue, but it is an open issue.
And that's correct, Your Honor, because they're elected. The CONCON members are elected. So in due respect with for CJ Puno's view, obviously, two schools of thought. You can be restrictive on the CONCON, but they may not follow you because they're elected by the people. So we give you a solution, Your Honors. And the solution is really a constituent assembly just to tackle those three restricted provisions of the economic provisions in the 1997 Constitution.
So, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Before our deputy Metro Leader can proceed with your indulgence, precisely, Chief Justice and Dean Perry, I filed in this 19th Congress a constitutional convention mode because it's a recent past, which is the 18th Congress. We had only 7 provisions, all economic, just placed there unless otherwise by law. It was sent to the Senate. 1 year, they did not act on it. They are closed. Right now, they have pronouncements that it's not a priority for any amendment. And so even if we have your 3 very good suggestions, they just don't want, the Senate do not want to tackle the Constitution. And we cannot really see why. Because when we talk about economic provisions, we're talking about opening our country to more foreign direct investments, resulting in job opportunities for our people. And now, after the COVID-19 pandemic, that is the felt need now to give more purchasing power, to have income by our people, so that they will be able to have their own, families and lives continue. And so that is the reason why, really, that the CONAS would be difficult because of the pronouncements now of the Senate President, Congresswoman Binay, others seem to say that whatever it is, they don't want anything to be touched in the Constitution. Now, reasons The question is, are they for the Filipino people? Do they see the need of our people to change the constitution even for economic amendments? That is the issue. And that is why we are confronted, Dean Perry, with that very recent past experience that there may be no chance at all. Now, you know, we wanted to have really the economic provisions. Why? Because clearly, if that is the one sent to the Senate, there's no political amendment. So now we're going, because they will not even touch economic, now we're going to CONCON. And that is where Chief Justice says that everything goes. It's the supreme constituent power by those elected. So those are my views on this, Dean Perry. There's really a big problem how the Senate will touch. Now, on the vote, difficult because the vote is 3/4 for Constituent Assembly, while CONCON also difficult, but 2/3. So it might be, we don't know how this will be treated also because we're not yet sure, even if you have CONCON, whether the Senate by a vote of 3/4 will support this. But let's try the other mode because the first mode clearly would not fly. So that is what we have right now. So thank you very much. Please proceed, Chairman. Our Vice Chairperson, Divine Yu, continues to preside over the open forum.
Thank you for that, Chairman Rodriguez, for sharing your thoughts. And at least for this representation, I found that very interesting because I wasn't aware of the details that had happened in the last Congress. But having heard from no less than the Chairman and our resource persons, I would think, Madam Chair, that it would be irrational and illogical that if we pass in an enabling legislation for a constitutional convention, that the Senate would approve of that when in the past we restricted the agenda to economic provisions and a constitutional assembly. It wouldn't make sense. Now, I'm fortunate. I have no less than the Deputy Speaker, Dong Gonzalez, seated next to me. Actually, the two Deputy Speakers. Now, I seriously doubt, with your indulgence, Chairman, I apologize. I can't find a more polite word, but I can't understand why the committee would propose a committee report recommending a constitutional convention when the chairman himself said that in the previous Congress, the provisions that were put in a constitutional assembly was limited to economic provisions because in a constitutional convention, that would be open-ended and may get into the political provisions that the Senate may be reluctant to address. So my suggestion, Mr. Chair,
see the
why
minority leader.
Why not the committee recommend limiting the amendments to economic provisions through a constitutional assembly and clarify voting separately, 3/4, and then have all the stakeholders go to the public, to the Filipino people, argue. Let's do our job, and not, the composition of the Senate is different now. The thinking there may be different. And maybe if the stakeholders, lobby to them, go to the public, there may be a different outcome. Without prejudice to maybe another committee report on a constitutional convention mode, and then let them choose on both. That's my initial thinking, Mr. Chair, because the Constitutional Assembly mode will be much faster, cheaper, and we can restrict the dialogue, the debate, on the economic provisions, which seems that all stakeholders or most stakeholders support, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Precisely this afternoon, that will be taken up when we take the proposed committee report, and everybody will be heard. All our members of the committee and members of Congress of the House in this afternoon session will be able to debate that. So the wisdom of whether still going with the con-us or con-con. And so therefore that will be on the table this afternoon. But let us first hear our resource persons in this morning session. Yes, I see. Before we recognize our next, you're still going to continue.
Yes, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, the minority leader, could I get a response to what I had just said earlier? Would anybody care to comment on the side?
Your Honor,
did this representation make sense?
Yes,
Am
Your
I
Honor.
out of field?
Yes, Your Honor. The way that I was able to get the conversation going and the discussion and debate is that because before what has happened is that you have a different chairperson in the Senate handling constitutional amendments. Now, I think the chairperson of the constitutional amendment in the Senate has the same mentality as Congressman Rufus and Chairman Rufus. Maybe things can move much easier. So your suggestion is very correct, Your Honor.
Is our Deputy Minority Leader Senior through with his interpellations?
Yes, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Would you first probably give a chance to our minority who is present now, who has listed? Minority Leader, would you allow Congressman Manuel to give his questions, or you would like to interject now, being pertinent to what we're discussing now?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
With the permission of Raul Manuel, I just would like to catch the views of the Chief Justice on his experience when the Senate chairperson said that your proposed bill is dead on arrival. So by that time, we were closed on amending the Constitution via Constitutional Convention or Constituent Assembly. Did you not entertain the thought that another mode of amending the Constitution is via people's initiative and the referendum? And in case everything fails, we still have another mode of amending it and presenting it to our people.
Justice.
Yes, Your Honor. Of course, there is the third mode of amending or revising the Constitution, and that is through people's initiative. But that mode has been used several times in order to amend or revise our Constitution. And the experience is that it is an exercise that is bound to fail, considering the difficulties of the process, the difficulty in framing the question, the difficulty in getting the approval of the people, the difficulty of having COMELEC validate the signatures. In fact, one legal expert called that provision in the 87 Constitution on people's initiative as a provision that was crafted in order to fail. And that is why in our draft federal Constitution, we also made amendments, revisions on how this people's initiative should be conducted in order to really make more realistic the exercise of the sovereign power of the people.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you.
Is our Minority Leader satisfied?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we go to our Kabataan Party List representative, the Honorable Manuel, will be followed by our DS, Deputy Speaker, Doc Gonzalez, and then we will have an adjournment so that we'll prepare for the next session. Please proceed. Suspension pala. Yeah. Please proceed, Representative Manuel.
Good day, Mr. Chair, to my fellow members of Congress, sa ating mga resource persons. Magandang araw. May nabanggit lang po, Mr. Chair, ang ating resource person mula sa DFA in terms of cooperation sa West Philippine Sea. And I'm very concerned, lalo na po kung tayo naman ay maninindigan na yung West Philippine Sea ay sa Pilipinas, but we would even go into discussions of that kind of exploration, lalo na yun nga yun, nag-rule yung ating Supreme Court na unconstitutional yung ganong arrangement kasama yung China. And like to ask kung still supportive pa rin po ba ang DFA na makapagpatuloy ng iba't ibang forma ng agreements with China in the West Philippine Sea? May you get a response from the DFA? Because that would be actually related to my further points on this matter of economic provisions in our Constitution.
Who would like to, yes,
DFA.
Yusek Soreta, please answer the query of our Representative Manuel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Representative. In an ideal world, we would exclude everyone from exploiting anything in the areas where we have jurisdiction. That is an ideal world. Under the current situation, we feel that to prevent an escalation of conflict, that we must engage in some form of confidence building. And the JMSU was designed to be exactly that. Not exactly at an exploitation, but a pre-exploration. We can understand that there would be those who would want to maintain the prohibitive provisions of the Constitution to the exclusion of everyone else. But the reality is our laws do not apply to other claimants. If all of them decide to enter an agreement to jointly explore the entire disputed area, the Supreme Court decision does not even allow us to dispute that or to try to manage it, to be part of it, to be able to manage it. It has many national security implications. So we have not yet seen the decision itself. We've been asking for a copy and they say it's still being written. So perhaps I would limit my, it's mostly speculative if we haven't really read it yet. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chair, kaya ko yun na tanong kasi it concerns how we can truly harness our natural resources dito sa bansa natin. Kasi po, ang dating po sa akin, kung meron po tayong analogy para bang merong gustong magnakaw sa sarili mong bahay, tas para na lang at peace or para hindi magkagulo, okay, papapasokin mo na lang yung magnanakaw para wala nang mangyaring tensyon or kung ano man. Now, Mr. Chair, I think I can sense na nasa committee na ito, edi patungo na nga tayo dun sa pagsusulong ng pag-amend dun sa economic provisions na ating Constitution. And I've been hearing points from our various resource persons sa una, pangalawa, at itong pangatlong session natin sa loob ng Kongreso. Pero Mr. Chair, still, I'd like to put on record na hanggang ngayon, nagbe-maintain yung ating posisyon na actually, di ba, to develop an economy, we need three components: land or natural resources, we need labor, and we need capital. Yung Pilipinas po, ang yaman natin, I've mentioned last time, ang yaman po natin to the point nga na Di dati sinasakop tayo, ngayon naman although indirectly ay para bang feeling natin sinasakop pa rin tayo in modern day era. Labor, nabanggitin po ng ating resource person from DFA. Maraming bansa nakaka-appreciate ng ating labor force. 1/3 ng population natin mga kabataan. That's so rich actually yung potential natin. But for the third, for capital, I believe kung magbibigay po tayo ng sapat na suporta halimbawa sa ating sariling mga entrepreneurs to develop their entrepreneurial skill, kung exploration po ng ating resources, mag-invest po tayo sa research and development kaysa yung ating mga scientists dahil kulang yung opportunity sa bansa, edi mangibang bansa, tas tayo pa nahihirapan paano sila pabalikin para lang na directly tumulong sa ating bansa. Kaya sa halip po na matingnan natin na tila ba hindi tayo nagde-develop dahil hindi natin binibigyan ng sapat na espasyo yung mga banyaga, it's more of actually how we train our own people para yung land natin, yung resources nandyan, lubos na mapakinabangan. Yung labor natin ay angkop no, dun sa needs natin for national development at makapag-develop tayo ng ating local capital markets no, kaysa yung approach na mabubuyang-yang lalo yung ating ekonomiya. No? And with that, Mr. Chair, no, and for now, no, and I really hope na sa pagpapatuloy no ng ating mga talakayan dito sa Kongreso ma-address po natin yung mga punto no kung bakit merong dangers no doon sa paglilift ng ating mga economic provisions that actually are leaning towards Filipino ownership.
Thank you. We always consider and take note of the consistent position of Congressman Manuel on these issues. Thank you very much. For the last interpellator, before we wind up, we would like to now acknowledge Deputy Speaker Dong Gonzales, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, magandang umaga po, ay hapon na pala, tanghali sa ating mga resource persons. For the information of CJ Puno and Dean Perry, my kababayan, I filed 5 House concurrent resolutions in 17 Congress. And in 18 Congress, I filed also a resolution both houses. And then in RBH number 15, the revision of law. In short, I filed 5 since 17, 18, and 19 Congress. And now, 19 Congress, I filed again resolution both houses number 1 for the term limits. But I'm listening to CJ Puno and to Dean Perry while on my way. Maganda po yung mga sinasabi ni CJ Puno. Sinabi po niya, magkakaroon tayo ng CONCON, pero hybrid. Maganda po yun. So yung CONCON po, ang gusto ko lang po may tanong, kasi po yung aking 5 final, akma po sa dalawang sinabi niyo. Ang gusto po ni Dean Perry, gusto niya is CON-US. Doon po sa akin, CON-US also. Sa isa naman, CON-CON po naman, CON-CON with economic provision. Ang tanong ko lang po, CJ, Mr. Chairman, if we have 253 districts all over the country, and we have, I think, 16 regions, how will you divide? Kung halimbawa, we have 253 CON-CON delegates, and how many appointee na kailangan po natin para maging hybrid po tayo? This is a combination of elected and appointment. Number 2 question, who will be appointed to these various sectors sa ating isasama sa CON-CON? So palagay ko po maganda po itong sinasabi nyo at ito po ang gusto kong malaman kung sino po ang mag-appoint at kung ilan po ang mga po pwedeng maging kasama ng mga CON-CON delegates natin if ever na magkaroon tayo ng CON-CON convention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman. That's my number 1 question. Yes, sir. Dean Perry.
Your Honor, I think CJ Puno already said that earlier that if you don't mind, CJ Puno, that the one who will be appointing the
con hybrid is really Congress and the executive. In other words, it's a combined, that will be, I suppose that will be provided for in the law, that the appointing power should be a combination of both executive and Congress, not only the executive. Now, as regards to the number of the members of this hybrid con, it's really the wisdom of this Congress, especially your committee, sir. Kayo po yung halal ng bayan. We couldn't put our opinions more than what you have, because you have more the pulse of the people rather than us. We can't think of any other group to be able to determine that rather than you, because you really have the pulse of the people. Now, as regards to the appointed members of that of that hybrid con, again, that will be up to the appointing authority, which will be composed of members of Congress and the executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So meaning to say, kasi 9 years old lang po ako noong 1972 nagkaroon ng con election. So ilan lang po yun, alam ko na po yun, pero hindi ko masyadong natatandaan pa kasi bata pa po ako ng 1972. So ngayon po, yung 253 over and above dun sa appointee natin, di ba? So magkakaroon tayo ng if we have 253 con delegates, pag over and above, magkakaroon po tayo ng plus X appointee. Ganyan po yung ating komposisyon ng ating komisyon ngayon, di ba? Pangalawa po, narinig ko po during the time of former President PRRD, nagkaroon po tayo ng mga Constitutional Commission. And during the time of former President GMA, nagkaroon din po tayo ng CONCOM. Di ba, no? So hindi na naman po naging successful yung ating ginawa. Although alam ko po yun, nag-out of town consultation tayo, maganda yung naging resulta, pero ayaw pa rin po tanggapin ng ating mga kamukhang nandito. So, yung pong aking House resolution, both houses, number 8, yan po ay akma dun sa sinasabi na bayanihan na federalism ni CJ Puno. Ako, ang aking proposal ay magkaroon ng 16 na rehiyon, magkaroon ng kanya-kanyang senador ang bawat rehiyon, at magkakaroon ng kanya-kanyang assignment yung bawat rehiyon. Sir, Chief Justice po, yung sa inyo po paano po yung balangkas ng ating federalism form of government po?
Unang-una po ay ibig kong sabihin na siguro hindi naman kinakailangang ganong karami ang maging elected members nung CONCON. 200 plus elected plus the appointed. Yung formula po na yun ay ang sinusunod nun ay yung traditional mindset natin na every district should have a representative and so on and so forth. Hindi ang sabi ko nga, hindi naman natin kailangang sundin yun. Lalong-lalo na kung ang pinag-uusapan ay yun lang necessity ng amending the economic provisions. Ano po ba ang purpose nung ganong modelo na bawat district ay may representative? Ang purpose lang po nun ay para malaman talaga yung pulso ng tao do sa mga distrito na yun. Ngunit yun ay matatamo naman natin nang hindi natin kinakailangan mag-elect ng representative sa bawat district. Yung pong kagaya nitong Kongreso, gaya rin ng Constitutional Convention, may power po ito na mag-issue ng summons, mag-imbita ng mga experts, mag-imbita ng mga tao para makita nila ano ba kagustuhan ng taong bayan dito sa particular district na ito. Hindi naman po tayo kailangan mag-appoint ng isang representative doon. Kung gano'n ang gagawin natin, talaga napakaraming magiging members ng Constitutional Convention at ang cost niyan talagang magiging malaki. So, yun ang una ko pong puntos. Yung sa pangalawa ay tama po yun, yung ginawa nung draft constitution ay pinerpetuate pa rin yung federal constitution. Pinerpetuate pa rin yung two houses of Congress. You have the House and the Senate. Pero sabi ko nga, pero yung powers nila ay iniba. Halimbawa, tama, kagaya nung sinasabi nyo, yung mga senador magiging elected by the districts, hindi na nationwide. Dahil nakita natin yung depekto nung ganong eleksyon eh. Sa Mindanao, kababayan natin sa Visayas, always underrepresented. Dahil mas maraming botante dito sa Luzon kaysa sa Visayas at sa Mindanao. Ang isang biro pa nga doon, mas marami pang senador sa isang naninirahan sa La Vista subdivision kaysa sa Mindanao. Oh, yung prinsipyo po na yon, yung sinasabi nyo, that was taken from the United States Constitution. Dahil yung mga estado sa Amerika, may malaki, may maliit. So pinantay nila yung representation para whether malaki yung state o maliit yung state, merong senador. And that follows the principle which we call equalizing the unequal.
So meaning you're in favor po to have a senador in every region? Yeah. Opo. Thank you po. So salamat po. Naging interesado lang po ako magtanong kasi all my resolution filed akma po sa mga sinabi nyo. Yung CONAS, sabi po ni Dean Perry, CONAS, economic provision only, I'm amenable on that. And number two, ang sinabi po ni Chief Justice Puno, yung hybrid na CONCON, maganda po yun at pumasok po yung federalismo na aking final din ng 17th Congress, House Bill, Resolution both houses, number 8. So ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa inyo. At siyempre ito para matanggap po ng tao kung CONCON yung gusto nila. Siyempre we are supporting CONCON. If only economic provision, we will support the economic provision. Nag-submit na po ako ng memorandum ko kay Chairman para at least i-submit po yun. So kayo po, Dean, kayo po sa ating mga kaibigan resource persons, salamat po sa inyong pagdalo. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Don Gonzales. And with that, on that note, we're going to have a recess. We have Ambassador Undersecretary Carlos Soreta. We have Ambassador Assistant Secretary Domingo Nolasco, Attorney Tan Uy. Of course, the Honorable Chief Justice of the Republic of the Philippines, Renato Puno, Dean Peripe, and Attorney Samaniego. Thank you very much for staying over and finishing this until the end. We are going to decide by this afternoon, and your inputs certainly were heard by our committee, those physically present and those on Zoom. Thank you so much, and happy singing from my songs down memory lane. Thank you very much. Thank you.